Welcome back to the Jungle Gardeners. Today we're going to talk about volunteers in the garden, specifically veggies that volunteer, but we're going to start with this reptile that volunteered in our garden. This is a veiled chameleon, specifically a female. This one we call Cyclops because, as you can see, she's missing an eye. We caught her in our yard after Hurricane Ian. She was in a pile of debris that we were cleaning up from the storm and had a badly injured eye that healed, but not as an eye, it's just gone. Anyway, we keep her in a cage, a nice chameleon cage now. But veiled chameleons are invasive in Southwest Florida. They're not supposed to be here, but they are. They're wild here. They're all over. And we get them all over our yard. And whenever we see them, we capture them and find a home for them as a pet, which is the only thing they should be down here. They should not be wild. So now we'll talk about some veggies that easily volunteer in Southwest Florida veggie gardens. So this guy here going crazy is our most common vegetable volunteer in our garden. It just gets everywhere. And this is Ethiopian kale. So it's a kind of kale that likes hot, dry weather. Well, not hot. It won't grow in the summer down here. It will not. Even though the seeds are year-round in our soil, it only volunteers in the winter. So as soon as fall starts, you'll start seeing these sprouting in all of our veggie beds. So I didn't plant any of these here. This was supposed to be my herb garden, but the Ethiopian kale has taken over, and it doesn't need water. Doesn't need a bunch of nutrients, and it just goes crazy. We had one plant get 7 feet tall last year, full of leaves. You can harvest all winter long. So this is a great veggie plant to grow if you want something that'll just volunteer. I didn't plant any this year in the garden. They planted themselves. And word to the wise, if you like to use kale in your smoothies, this is not the kale for your smoothie. Trust me, I learned that the hard way, which is disappointing because I like to have a kale smoothie every morning, but this is not the kale for that. It's got a spicy, bitter bite to it, like mustard greens. So very strong. You will taste that in your smoothie. It's not pleasant. Trust me. Tried it once. Won't ever make that mistake ever again. But it's a great kale for sprinkling into salads. Don't have a whole salad of this because, like I said, it's got that bitter, mustardy bite. Very great for stews, soups, and stir fries, though. Fantastic for that. So anytime we make a soup, stew, or stir fry, we'll grab some of this and throw it in. Also great for a mixed green pesto. So we also have some basil in this bed, and we'll do a mix of basil and this kale for our pesto. Another volunteer veggie we've started to get is the Everglades cherry tomato. I didn't plant these. These volunteered in the garden. I moved them to where I wanted them because they were just volunteering everywhere thanks to the birds. But yes, once you first grow Everglades cherry tomatoes, you will never not grow it because it will be a permanent volunteer in your veggie garden. But it's cherry tomatoes, so I don't like tomatoes, but I grow them for some of our pets that like to eat them and friends who like to eat them. This one was a surprise to me. We grew it for the first time last winter, was Bok Choy, and I didn't expect it to actually go to seed and produce seeds, but it left seeds everywhere, and it's been volunteering. This particular plant was actually a volunteer. Probably harvest it soon. I mean, it's gorgeous. I haven't done anything for this guy. It just volunteered, it grew, and it's doing great. So Bok Choy is one that I never even thought we could grow in our gardens down here because it's so hot, much less that it would volunteer around the garden. This is Brad's Atomic Grape Tomatoes, and we started growing it a few years ago, and it is very prolific. And this is another one that will volunteer in the garden if you leave any fruits out, if you don't harvest and eat them all. If any get stuck down in your soil, it will volunteer, and that'll be something you'll have forever. This plant here is called toothache plant. It's not officially a vegetable, but it's an herbal flower that we somehow got seeds from. Grew it once, and then I don't know how, but it has ended up as a volunteer all throughout our garden. So this pot was supposed to be herbs, and somehow this grew out of the pot. This toothache plant has taken over, and it looks great and healthy. Doesn't need too much. It's supposed to have some kind of medicinal benefits for like toothaches. Not sure, but it is quite the happy volunteer around our garden. And this pot right next to the toothache plant has a bunch of the volunteers. So there's a volunteer Everglades tomato that I was talking about, Ethiopian Kale, and then not veggies, but this is the native blue porterweed, so that's a pretty native Florida flower to have around, which the actual flowers are actually edible. They taste like mushrooms. Then we have a purslane right here, which again is not a veggie, but you can eat it. It's very healthy. Check out Green Dean Eat the Weeds for his information on eating purslane. And then another plant that's not a veggie but is a volunteer is this guy here, native wildflower called scorpion tail that volunteers everywhere. Great for pollinators. This is another one that's not an official veggie plant. It's not one that you're likely to find in any seed catalogs. It's a native plant down here called creeping cucumber. And just like its name, it creeps. It's a vine that'll creep on everything. It gets everywhere. And it gets tiny little itty bitty cucumbers on it that are edible and good for a salad. Not good for pickling though, apparently. But yeah, that volunteers all around our yard, whether we want it there or not. And last but not least, for our best plants to volunteer in your veggie garden is this right here, which is a basil. It's, I think, a blue spice basil. It was a free seed packet we got from Baker's Creek, and planted just a couple plants, and it just has kept itself going in the yard. So this was the second generation. It reseeded itself. I didn't plant it, left some seeds in the soil, and so we're finding it all over the yard growing in various pots. So that is what volunteers really well from our vegetable garden down here in Zone 9B, Southwest Florida. And let me know what volunteers in your garden. Bye for now.